Can you hear me? Greetings, friends. Why is that not on? Hide video? No? I might have to call the tech people. Yeah, the projector's not going on. Hey, friends on Zoom, can y'all hear me right now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Is that you, Jacob? Hi, nice to see you.
Hi.
Now,
Good
why
to
can't
see
you
you.
see me?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm glad you can hear me. Hey, Michael, I think I'm gonna call the tech people real quick. Oh, maybe that? Yeah, can you see me now? Jacob?
Yes, yes.
So where is this camera? Is it on the computer? No? Yeah, it's so weird that when, okay, very strange. Oh, look at that. Okay, cool. All right, welcome everyone. Good to see you. I'm glad you're here. I enjoyed our very lengthy conversation after class on Monday. I don't remember what we were talking about, do you? I've thought about it a lot. Tell us, yeah.
That sort of implied whenever you said that there's this, I'm trying to remember what we're talking about. There's this purpose, this idea that humanity is going to gradually improve over time.
Yes.
Spiritually.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
That was a thought that was pervasive through medieval philosophers and.
Yes.
Yeah, this notion of gradual human improvement. I would just say.
Yes.
That seems to imply purpose, perhaps gives us insight into what the purpose of humanity is.
Absolutely. Okay, good. Yeah, no, that's good. Jacob, what has Jacob done? What does this word mean?
That is the like definition in a philosophical airtight dictionary?
No, that you're thinking of essence. Who can help Jacob Dunn? Purpose. Say more. Say I interrupted you, Mason.
It means purpose and final cause.
Yeah, purpose, final cause, end. The word end comes to mind. Like there was a group of theologians in the 17th century called the Westminster Divines who said that what is the chief end of man? What is the chief end of man? And yeah, the answer, in their opinion, is to glorify God and enjoy God forever. But yeah, end, telos, purpose, final cause. Isn't it so? Final and end, same, right? You know how to say end in French? Fin, F-I-N, like thin. Yeah, end, good. In Latin, this is finis. Finis, telos, this is Greek, this is Latin. It means purpose or end, good, okay. Y'all, today we're gonna look at Thomas Aquinas. We're gonna delve into the Summa. We're gonna look at Article 2, Question 2 of the Prima Pars. Question 2, Article 2 of the Prima Pars. I am so grateful that we had an opportunity to discuss or to use Jean-Pierre Torel's guide, or Thomas Aquinas' Summa, this book right here. I'm very glad that we got to look at this book and use this in this class. It's an amazing book. I mean, if you think Thomas Aquinas is worth knowing, I really recommend this book. Today, however, we're going to use a different one by F.C. Bauerschmidt. He teaches at Loyola, Baltimore. Holy Teaching, Introducing the Summa Theologiae of Thomas Aquinas. And I want to start out like this. So do y'all remember sort of how I hastily ended the class last time? Do you remember how I hastily ended the class last time? Let me ask it to you a different way. Do you remember how we talked about the prima pars, the segunda pars, and the tertia pars? But then I said, sort of abruptly, I said, Thomas never finished writing the Summa. Do you remember that? I wish I knew how to control the volume on this mic, but I don't, so who cares? And why wasn't he able to finish? Do you remember what I tried to imply? Why? Oh, I left stuff in my car. I left stuff in my car. I don't think it matters, though. I'm gonna repeat after you so that everyone can hear. He was at Mass and he kind of got this notion from God. Was it a notion? When I hear the word notion, I think of some abstract ideas like maybe some concepts or essences. Is that what Thomas Aquinas experienced or received? Who can? Thank you. Who can help? How about this? Yeah, go ahead. He had a mystical experience. He had some sort of a vision. He wasn't thinking about stuff. He experienced something, whatever that means. I mean, I think of St. Paul on the road to Damascus, where he says that he had a vision of the risen Christ. But Thomas Aquinas experienced something. And what did he say what did he say? Would you agree with me that he reassessed the value of all of his theological and philosophical thinking in light of that mystical experience that he had? Would you agree with me? What did he say about that reassessment? He said that everything that he had written before was like straw. Wow. And you know, that also led to a really interesting discussion, although sometimes I get my two classes confused. Yeah, I think it was this class. Did I talk about atheism on Monday in this class? I think that it's in this class where I said that it's really hard to be a good atheist. Some Christians even say that in order to be a real atheist, you need to be a Christian. Why in the world would I? Here's why. It's because for Thomas Aquinas, and one of you uttered the phrase, the limits of reason. I don't remember who it was. Someone talked about the limits of reason. Yes, for the medievals, human reason is radically limited. Now, most modern philosophy departments won't tell you that about the medievals, but it's absolutely true. And Thomas Aquinas says, we can't wrap our minds around what God is. The word that I use, and this is the word I use, and it's a word that comes from the Reformed tradition, but it's rooted in pre-modern Christian tradition, is the incomprehensibility of God. The incomprehensibility of God. God is not something that we're able to comprehend or apprehend. So in other words, Thomas Aquinas is saying that the task of stating what God is so difficult that human beings can't do it, right? And so in order to be an atheist, you have to deny the existence of the thing that Thomas Aquinas says he can't even affirm. You see what I mean? I hope that makes sense. It's really hard to, in fact, it might even be impossible to deny the God of Thomas Aquinas and C.S. Lewis and St. Augustine, simply because what they're affirming is incomprehensible. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. And it's connected to this discussion that we had about how, and we saw this last class, about how our language with God, whenever it's abstract, and I'm going to say in the third person and theoretical, is radically deficient. As opposed to what? The language of prayer, the language of talking to God, liturgical language. Why did we look at the confessions? And why did I emphasize the fact that when Augustine's writing the confessions, it is a prayer to God? This is why. What someone like Thomas Aquinas would say is that it's one thing to talk about God in the third person, theoretically and abstractly. When we do that, we run the danger of being full of BS. But there's something very different about talking to God for Thomas Aquinas. Second person, are you with me? You, thou, prayer, the language of adoration, the language of the heart, the language of love, the language of desire. That's why we read the Confessions, and I emphasize that. That's also something that comes into play when you study Saint Anselm, because guess what? David Newsom is not here, but Anselm's Monologion, the work in which we find the ontological argument, is written as a prayer.
And actually, I am here.
Yes, David? Oh, hey, yes, you are here. Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that?
Not particularly. No,
You
I think that
agree?
about covers it.
Do you agree with what I said?
Yes.
In your studies or research on your paper, have you come across the importance or the idea that it's very important, the fact that Anselm's work is written as a prayer to God?
Not that in particular.
Okay.
I feel
No
like
worries.
people are tempted more to read it like a textbook on theology than a
Yes.
kind of personal interaction.
There's a theologian, and I'm not at all hoping that you will use this work in your paper, which, by the way, did you already turn it in?
Yes.
Thanks be to God, then we don't have to worry about it. But the theologian Karl Barth, maybe you've heard the name Karl Barth. He was actually a Protestant theologian. But Karl Barth wrote a book called Fides Quaerens Intellectum. Fides Quaerens Intellectum. Anyone know what that means? Faith Seeking Understanding. This is the title of Barth's book on Anselm, the Proslogion. And David, he makes this point. Karl Barth says, you cannot understand what's going on in Anselm's Proslogion unless you appreciate the fact that he's talking to God. And I would say something similar for St. Augustine and the Confessions, okay? So anyway, all of that was a little bit of review from last time. What we're gonna do today is focus on the Summa, Article 2, Question 2 of the Prima Pars. And to get started, I'm going to use F.C. Bauerschmidt because he does something very useful. He lays out the structure of the question or the quaestio that Thomas Aquinas uses in the Summa. And here it is, according to Bauerschmidt, and I agree. Can you see that? So there's 5 parts. A question or thesis put forward. A question or thesis put forward. Objections against the thesis are offered. These can be quite numerous. So I'm going to write these down. Structure of, and I'm just going to say the structure of the quaestio. It's actually the structure of each article, so I'm not sure what to do with that. Sometimes this is called the quaestio method, the quaestio method. Sometimes it's called the disputatio. There's lots of different words. But first, you have, I'm going to say a thesis. Now, Bauerschmidt says a question/thesis. That is because usually this is worded in terms of a question, but all you got to do is take the question and flip it around to make a statement. Are you with me? You just, so if I were to say, is Joe Biden a Marxist? Who can take that statement and put it into a, who can take that question and put it into a statement form?
Joe Biden is a Marxist.
Joe Biden is a Marxist, period. That's right. What if I were to say, are the chairs in the CAS building consistently sanitized? Who can take that question and turn it into a statement? Can someone in the room do it? The chairs in the CAS building are or are not consistently sanitized. Good. So you see, number one is a thesis. As we're going to see in a moment, it tends to be put in the form of a question, but you just got to take the question and put it in the form of a statement. Secondly, you have objections against the thesis. Now notice, did I say one objection against the thesis? No, objections plural. One of the main points, maybe the main point that I want to make to you guys about the quaestio method or the disputatio method of Thomas is that it is a form of dialectic. It's a form of dialectic. Now, what do I mean by dialectic? Here's what I mean. I mean the thing that Socrates started. This thing that Socrates started, or Plato started, because remember, we don't have anything written down by Socrates. He's like Jesus and the Buddha. You could think of him almost like a character invented by Plato and two other authors. Aristophanes talks about Plato and some other person that I can't remember right now. Am I saying that Socrates was not a historical figure? No, I'm not saying that. I think that he was a historical figure, but our access to him is in the form of a character in a story, right? Nevertheless, Socrates is the one who walked around the streets of Athens and like, hey, so you're a crafts maker? You make shoes? Tell me about shoes. You're a politician? You think you know what justice is? Tell me about justice. And what Socrates does is he takes different views and puts them into dialectic. And in my mind, he's sort of the first person in the West to do this. Aristotle comes along and he does the same thing. Remember how we looked at the metaphysics and his deduction of the unmoved mover? Well, if we were to go back and look at that again, I could show you how what Aristotle's doing in that text is he's taking different opinions of different thinkers, predecessor thinkers, and he's putting them together. He's saying, Thales said this, Parmenides said this, Plato said this, and he's trying to put them into dialectic so as to come up with a greater truth. Are you with me so far? Now, let me just hit the pause button and say, did you hear what I said? Predecessors? Do you realize what that means? It means that Aristotle and Thomas are working within a tradition. They're working within a tradition. What does that mean? It means that previous thinkers are insanely important for them. They think that in order to arrive at the truth, or at least to approximate the truth, or at least to get closer to the truth, we have to attend to the opinions of others in the tradition. What tradition are we talking about? Well, for now, let's call it the tradition of Western philosophy. But I want to write another word on the board, and I will not test you on this, but if you care about this stuff, you should know it. And it's the word endoxa. This is plural, and it means opinions. See, if you study Aristotle, let's say you were going to go to grad school and take a seminar on Aristotle. Hopefully, one of the things that you would begin to realize is that Aristotle always begins his arguments with these opinions from previous predecessors, and he takes them and he puts them together. What are those opinions called? They're called endoxa. The singular would be endoxon with an O-N. Now, Socrates performs dialectic, Aristotle performs dialectic, Thomas Aquinas performs dialectic. We're going to see that. You see, it's not just one objection against the thesis that he entertains. It's not just one objection against the thesis that he entertains. It's multiple objections. He's listening to lots and lots of voices. Isn't it interesting how C.S. Lewis talks about the model, and he's right, that this notion that the medieval worldview was like a grand organic unit, not unlike a cathedral. If you've ever been to Europe, if you've ever been to Paris, maybe Germany, maybe Switzerland, maybe even in England, And you see these Gothic cathedrals with the arches and the stained glass windows and the nave and the transept and all of it, the icons. And so there's lots of little parts, but they come together to form an organic unity. Are you with me? That's how C.S. Lewis describes the medieval world, the model, he says. So it is a unity, or at least it's a aspirational unity. And yet, isn't it interesting that Thomas Aquinas is also kind of a pluralist in the sense that he's listening to lots of voices. And he's not saying that only one of them's right. I mean, have you ever heard Christians say there's only one way to heaven? Okay, I'm not trying to make fun of that, but I'm saying Thomas isn't actually saying that. He's not saying, oh, here's 4 different opinions and only one of them is right. No, no, no. He's saying that they all have something to add. I just think that it's interesting that underlying this great model that C.S. Lewis talks about, there's a kind of plurality of voices coming into play, all right? So, number 3, counter-objections that speak for the thesis. Okay. Counter-objections in favor of thesis. Okay? What's next? The master offers a response outlining his own position. The master in this case being Thomas Aquinas. I'm just going to say Thomas's view. And by the way, these objections, let me think here. Yeah, objections. These objections right here are usually called the sed contra. But on the other hand, the sed contra, that's what the objections are called. And Thomas's own view is usually abbreviated like that, RESP, like respuesta in Spanish. But it's respondeo. I respond. That's Thomas's view. And then fifthly, you have what Bauer-Schmidt calls the replies to any objections that remain. Replies to remaining objections. Okay, so y'all, I just think that this Bauer-Schmidt has done us a huge favor in outlining the structure of the articles. Yeah, and so, yeah, it's good stuff. I think now we're just going to start reading. We have 35 minutes, 40 minutes maybe, and we're just going to start reading the Summa. Okay, we're going to read question 2, article 2 of the Prima Pars. I passed around the actual book last time. And let's just see what happens. And we're going to look at the, and I'm about to erase the board. So I think what I'll do just for kicks is make sure that our Zoom friends can see all that. I'm about to erase the board. This will be recorded and uploaded to my YouTube channel, but I want to erase the board and because I'm going to write some other stuff. Okay? Yeah. We're going to delve into the actual 5 ways now. Okay? So I'm going to erase the board and let's start reading. And you do have this on Canvas. It's question 2, article 2. Who can tell me, can someone tell me what question 2 is? Say it again. Very good, Jacob. Whether God exists. And that's actually article 3. The title of question 2 is a bit more broad than that. It's just the existence of God. That's the title of question 2. Can you see that? The existence of God. But yeah, you're right that Article 2 is what you said it is. Let's look at Article 1, though. Whether the existence of God is self-evident. Now, can y'all see that? Are you able to read that? Who can take that question and put it into a statement? Good, the existence of God is self-evident. So according to Bauer-Schmidt, what we would do is we would take that thesis, the existence of God is self-evident, and look, Thomas immediately starts to give us objections, right? He immediately starts to give us objections. Objection 1, objection 2, objection 3. So here he quotes the Bible. You see that? So the Bible would just be one of these authorities. And then he says, on the contrary, that's the sed contra, the replies to the objections. And then he gives his own view, right? The respondeo, I answer that. This is what Thomas really thinks. So I really believe in the power of skimming. I try to drill that into my intro students. I don't always succeed. But like one of the really interesting things about the Summa is you could skip everything except for the respondio section to learn what Thomas thinks. And really, you could read the first sentence. A thing can be self-evident. Yeah, you can read the first sentence usually, okay? So it's kind of interesting. Side note, it's completely opposite of St. Bonaventure. St. Bonaventure is more, I don't want to say flowery, but just, you can't skim Bonaventure, okay? You can skim Thomas. He's more systematic, and so that I think that lends itself to skimming. But we are going to look at Article 2, whether it can be demonstrated that God exists. Now, who can flip that into a statement, a thesis? Mirka, can you? Good. It can be demonstrated that God exists. And so first, Thomas throws out some objections. We're actually going to skip those because we don't have a lot of time, and I want to focus on what he really. Sorry, it's not Article 2. It's Article 3. I am on drugs. Article 2 is whether it can be demonstrated that God exists. Let me say something quickly about this article before we move on to Article 3. Forgive me, and that is remember. What's innovative and sort of radical about the 5 ways is that most people in Thomas's day would say, we don't need to prove God's existence. They would actually say, duh, that's like saying, do I need to prove the existence of this lectern? Most people would say no. Why would you do that? Like everyone believes in it, blah, blah, blah. That's how they thought about God. Thomas is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Not so fast, cowboy. It's actually not self-evident in a straightforward way that God exists. Let's think about how human reason can generate arguments in favor of God's existence that are not self-evident, that need to be reasoned out, okay? So I wanted to say that. Remember, we live in a world where if you're going to believe in God, it's almost like you have to mount an argument in favor of God. So we live in a world, in my opinion, where the default position is against belief in God in some ways, especially if you're sort of an intellectual or maybe a cultural elite person or maybe even just a university student. In Thomas's day, it was different. The default position in his world was, duh, obviously everyone believes in God. And so it's kind of crazy that Thomas is like, hold up, cowboy. It's not self-evident, and so we need to make an argument for it, okay? Now, Article 3, finally. Whether God exists, and I'll flip into a statement, God exists. We're going to skip the objections. We're going to skip the objections. We're going to skip the sed contra. Oh, notice, remember earlier in the semester I made a big deal out of the Exodus 3? I am what I am. Ego sum qui ego sum. I am. I think it's quis ego sum. I am what I am. Remember what we said about that? A tautology. It doesn't really say anything about God. It'd be like saying Jacob Dunn is Jacob Dunn. Oh, no shit, Sherlock, but you haven't told me anything that I didn't already know, right? So yeah, just to reiterate, Exodus 3:14 is super important in terms of the history of, I'll say theism, the history of philosophy and theology in the West. And it's a great example, in my opinion, of how the Hebrew legacy links up with the Greek classical legacy, because as we talked about in a previous class, the fact that God's name is tautologous, is a tautology, is strikingly resonant with the tradition of negative theology, beginning with Parmenides. We can't know what being / God is. We can only know what being / God isn't. Okay. We're not going to talk about the sed contra. Not going to talk about the sed contra. Not going to talk about, yes, let's start with this. We're going to read the respondeo, and we're going to read it in English, okay? I answer that the existence of God can be proved in 5 ways. These are the 5 ways, not the 5 arguments, not the 5 reasons, the 5 ways, okay? And we're going to read them, okay? Oh, first I'm going to list them. First, I'm going to list them. 5 ways, which I think is vie. Quinque viis. Quinque viis. I won't write that down. The 5 ways. All right. 1, reasoning from moving things to a first mover. By the way, am I right? Am I right? Yes. 2, from effects to cause. 3, from contingency, or I'm going to say from contingent things to necessary. I'm just going to put necessity for now. From contingent things to necessity. 4 and 5. Let's see, 4. You know what? I'm gonna leave these blank for a moment. 4 is the ontological argument. I'm not going to word it now, but 4 is the ontological argument, a la Saint Anselm and David Newsom. And then 5 is the teleological argument. Teleological argument, okay? So let's start reading. I hope that I'm making sense. Okay. The first and most manifest way is the argument from motion. Now, y'all, let me tell you what a great paper topic would be. Darn, I should have said this at the beginning of the semester. Sorry. To reread what the Aristotle text that we read, Aristotle's deduction of the first mover, and compare it with this. They would be very similar, very similar. The first and most and more manifest way is the argument from motion. It is certain and evident to our senses. Okay, I have to stop. Let me finish the sentence, then I'll stop. It is certain and evident to our senses that in the world some things are in motion. Stop. Okay, I have to say this. These first three ways, I worded them very specifically. I worded them intentionally because in each case, there's from X to Y. Now, Thomas begins with X. He begins with what's right in front of us. He starts with what is self-evident, or what is evident or apparent, and then reasons to what is further away. Aristotle does the same thing. In fact, I used to teach this in my intro class. I didn't do it this semester, but I used to. Aristotle, what I used to do was contrast Aristotle's method of discovery with Descartes' method of discovery. Descartes' all about clear and distinct ideas as a way to find certainty. Aristotle's method I describe as this way, in this way. He reasons from that which is most knowable to us to that which is most knowable in itself. Let me repeat that. Do you remember if I talked about this in the intro class, Mason? I think I did. He reasons from that which is most knowable to us. In other words, stuff that's right in front of you, stuff that you can perceive with your senses, to, and then it's really weird how he says it, things that are most knowable in itself. That's kind of crazy. That most knowable in itself thing, that's talking about the reflexive thing. That's talking about this idea that somehow in the mind of God, there's a relationship of self-knowledge. One of the names for the unmoved mover of Aristotle is what? Thought thinking itself. Can you see how that's a reflexive thing? It's a reflexive thing. Descartes has the same thing. It's just that he takes it from the mind of God and puts it into the mind of the human being. But in each case, this is the basis of what they call first philosophy. And see, that's the other reason why I worded these first three statements like I did, from X to Y. Weirdly, Y is first. Now, it's last in terms of the order of discovery. You don't start with Y and move to X. No. You start with X and move to Y. And so in terms of a method, Y is not first. But in another sense, it is first. In what sense? Well, it's hard to articulate. Maybe first in importance. Have you ever heard the phrase primus inter pares? The Pope in Rome is primus inter pares, first among equals. So something can be first or primus or prime in ways other than sequence. 1, 2, 3, that's one way of being first. A, B, C, A is first, that's sequence. But there's other ways of being first. Primus inter pares, the first mover, maybe, how is the first mover first? Well, maybe in terms of importance, or maybe in other ways. Maybe it's like, until you grasp this, you actually don't fully understand this yet. Or maybe it has to do with the way that the different disciplines or fields of science or scientific disciplines are organized. Because what Thomas says is things like, every science gets its first principles from some other science and just receives them on the basis of trust. The point is, Thomas, in each case, moves from X to Y. X is what's right in front of you. It's what's most knowable to you. Y is what's most knowable in itself. Y is where the goods are. And there's a sense in which Y, the thing that he moves to, is foundational or prior or most important, okay? Let's keep reading. Any questions, comments at this time? In some ways, the whole semester has been leading up to this. You know what I mean? So I'm going to keep reading. Now, whatever is in motion is put in motion by another, for nothing can be in motion except it is in potentiality. That's a big word, potentiality. We've talked about that. To that towards which it is in motion, whereas a thing moves in as much as it is an act. We've talked a lot about potency and act in this class. Here we have it right here. For motion is nothing else than the reduction of something from potentiality to actuality. But nothing can be reduced from potentiality to actuality except by something in a state of actuality. Thus, that which is actually hot, okay, I'm gonna skip. Let's read this. Oh, how about this? It is therefore impossible that in the same respect and in the same way a thing should be both mover and moved, i.e., that it should move itself. The first mover, the prime mover, moves transitively, actively. It moves other things, like I move the marker, but it itself is not moved. And everything else, so the first mover is a mover, not a movee. Everything else is a movee, not a mover. Nothing's both, he says here. Therefore, whatever is in motion, okay, I'm going to skip. But this cannot go to infinity. Imagine like billiard balls or dominoes, right? Like, have you ever seen those YouTube videos with like a bajillion dominoes? It takes like 15 minutes for the whole thing to fall down. Think about it in terms of that. This cannot go to infinity. It might be a really long chain of dominoes bumping into one another and knocking each one over, but it cannot go to infinity because then there would be no first mover and consequently no other mover. So this is an example of how for Thomas Aquinas, there's something irrational about an actual infinity. Yeah. All right, y'all, I want to keep reading because Thomas, and this is sort of like the second big point, or this is a separate big point that I want to make, and I'm going to write it on the board like this. Names of God, because Thomas does something crazy in each of the end of the 5 ways. So there's 5 ways. You might think of them like 5 different paragraphs, right? The first, the second, the third, etc. So 5 different paragraphs. And at the end of each paragraph, he gives his proof for God. He gives this proof for God, but then he says, oh, and this is what everyone means when they say God. So looking at the first one, he says, so he reasons back to a first mover, right? And then at the end he says, and this everyone understands to be God. And this everyone understands to be God. Okay, so at the end of each of the 5 articles, see, I'll give you a preview real quick. For the second one, he says it again, to which everyone gives the name of God. So at the end of each of the 5 ways, he makes a point about naming God. Let me tell you why this is interesting. Several years ago at Wheaton College or Wheaton University, which is an evangelical Christian university, a very good school, by the way, very good school. One of the faculty members got in trouble for suggesting that, and remember, this is a Christian evangelical college. One of the faculty members got in trouble for suggesting that when Muslims pray to Allah, they're praying to God. Would you agree with that? Let's say that you're sort of a evangelical believing Christian. Would you agree with that? Well, Thomas is actually saying something very profound, I think. He's saying that, God can be referred, it sounds weird, but I think he's saying this, God can be referred to in lots of different ways. I mean, he's actually saying that whenever Aristotle deduced the unmoved mover, he was talking about God. Now, does he mean he was talking about Zeus? No. Does Thomas Aquinas mean that Aristotle was talking about a figment of his imagination that he thought was God? No, no, no. He's saying Aristotle was talking about God. Crazy. Worth pondering, worth thinking about. And I hope I'm making sense. Because he does this at the end of each of the 5 ways. He makes a point about naming God. Let's read the second way. I've got 25 or 30 minutes. The second way, and this is causality. Efficient cause. In the world of sense, again, sense, he begins with stuff that's right in front of you. You have a question, Mason? No problem. Oh, please forgive me. Do you want to present? Forgive me. I was thrown a curveball because someone else was going to present today and they requested to do it on Monday. And then I just was like, oh, yeah, sorry. I don't want to screw you up or inconvenience you. What were you, what are you presenting on? Great, Bonaventure. Okay, can you do it on either Monday or Wednesday? It's your choice. Did I tell you you were going to do it on Wednesday? Would you mind doing it on Wednesday? Sure. Great. Forgive me. Thank you. I'm doing the best I can, and I know you are. So thank you. Awesome. Grateful. I hope that no one else was scheduled to present. I doubt that they were. Okay, good. Yeah, Michael asked me if he could present on Wednesday, and I was like, yay, yes. And partly because we haven't gotten to Bonaventure yet, but we're about to. Okay. Thank you, Mason. Again, notice the language about sense. Aristotle begins with what's right in front of you and then reasons to something that's not right in front of you. God. He begins with something that's evident and then reasons to something that's less evident. I hope that you see that that's the opposite of what Descartes does. Thomas Aquinas, following Aristotle, basically says, you know what? I'm not going to demand perfection. Thomas Aquinas, following Aristotle, says, you know what? I can't prove to you that your senses aren't deceiving you. We're just going to take it for granted that you really do see stuff, triangles, squirrels, words on a page, trees, mountains, celestial bodies. We're just going to take it on faith. There's that word faith again, the second segment of Plato's line. And then we're going to reason from there to God. My view is that when he gets to God, that bolsters the confidence that he began with about sense perception. It's kind of a circular argument, but you know what? Not all circular arguments are vicious. Some of them are, but that one's not, in my view. And I'll quote one of my philosophy professors from undergrad. There's nothing wrong with a circular argument as long as the circle contains everything. And this circle does because it contains God. Now, I don't know how you feel about that, but the point is, Aristotle begins with what is evident. Certain? No. He didn't care about certainty. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't care, but he didn't demand it. Only Descartes comes along and says, damn it, if I can't be certain of something, I'm just going to be a radical skeptic. Aristotle and the pre-moderns are not like that. Thomas Aquinas is not like that. They begin with what's in front of them. They reason to God. Once they get to God, in my view, it grounds the starting point. So it's cogent, in my view. Now, it requires faith, yes, but it's still cogent. There's nothing wrong with faith, rightly understood. Okay, I'm going to skip number 2 about efficient cause and causality. Let's go to number 3. I like number 3 better anyway. Number 3, I've got about 10, 15 minutes at the most. Oh, just back to number 2 real quick, the thing about naming God at the end. We already did this, but to which everyone gives the name of God. Okay, so there he does it again. The names of God is very, very interesting in the thought of Thomas Aquinas. Let's look at the third way. The third way is taken from possibility and necessity and runs thus. We find in nature things that are possible to be and not to be, since they are found to be generated. Now, this is kind of weird. It took me a long time to sort of figure out what was going on here. Aristotle does the very same thing. What he's talking about is, that's why I use the word contingency. The word possibility is kind of funky because, I don't know, what do you, like when I think of possibility, in my mind, a UFO is possible. A unicorn is possible. He's not talking about stuff like that. And I'll tell you what else he's not talking about. He's also not talking about what philosophers mean by the virtual. The virtual. We don't have time to talk about this. Let me just cut to the chase. What Thomas means by stuff that's possible is things that are contingent. Contingent. What is that? It's pretty much everything. I mean, I have a dog at home. The dog is a Schnorky, part Schnauzer, part Yorkshire Terrier. That dog is contingent. Why? Because it depends on lots of things. Its parents, the fact that I rescued the dog when it was 6 weeks old, the fact that we feed it every day, on and on and on. It's dependent on stellar evolution. It's dependent on lots of things. It's dependent on the presence of oxygen in the atmosphere. There's a bajillion things we could name. The point is that dog is dependent on lots of things. The dog is dependent on prior things in order for its existence. Guess what? That's also true of this marker. It's true of that chair. It's true of this human being right there named Jacob Dunn. We are all contingent beings. That's all Aristotle's talking about. What he means is you didn't have to exist. Now, does a triangle have to have 180 degrees? In Aristotle's mind, yes. That's not contingent. See, mathematics is funky. Mathematics is important theologically and philosophically, but the existence of like stuff in the world is contingent. That's all he means here with this language of possibility, okay? And if it's contingent, then it almost certainly came to be and passes away. This is Plato's realm of becoming, and also Aristotle's realm of physis or nature, okay? So that's what he means by this language of possibility. He's talking about contingent beings. And I think that's right. I defy you to find a thing in the world that's not contingent, a thing in the world that doesn't depend on something for its existence, okay? But it is impossible for these always to exist. There you have it. They tend to come into being and pass away into non-being. Therefore, if anything is possible not to be, then at one time there could have been nothing in existence, yes. Now, if this were true, even now there would be nothing in existence, right? If there was never anything in existence, then there would be nothing in existence now. Because that which does not exist only begins to exist by something already existing. Therefore, if at one time nothing was in existence, it would have been impossible for anything to have begun to exist. And even now, nothing would be in existence, which is absurd. I agree that that's absurd. I think that something is in existence now. Therefore, not all things are merely not all beings are merely possible. Not all beings are contingent. But there must be something, but there must exist something, the existence of which is necessary. And y'all, this all men speak of as God. Necessary being. You realize that God does not exist if God exists, if the Christian God exists, I'm not talking about Thanos with the big biceps, not talking about Zeus, I'm talking about the God that Aquinas, Augustine, and C.S. Lewis believe in. If that God exists necessarily. All right, way 4. By the way, modern people have criticized the hell out of these 5 ways. For example, David Hume brilliantly casts doubt on the reality of cause. Brilliantly. Most Christians that I respect give Hume a high five on that. There's ways of responding to Hume, but Hume has a really good point. Kant does something similar with the ontological argument that we're about to look at. Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about that stuff. Good thing that this isn't a modern philosophy class, it is a medieval philosophy class. I just wanted to say, though, that modern people have picked these apart. Other modern people have come along and defended them. Okay? The 4th way is taken from the gradation to be found in things. This is the ontological argument. Remember, the ontological argument basically says it's greater for something to exist in reality than in the mind only. Okay? So a unicorn that exists in reality would be greater than a unicorn that exists in my mind only. I think that that's true. I think that that's true. You might not. The 4th way, taken from the gradation to be found in things. Among beings, there are some more and some less good, true, noble, and the like. But more and less are predicated of different things according as they resemble in their different ways something which is the maximum, as a thing is said to be hotter according blah, 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 blah. And for those things that are greatest in truth are greatest in being, as it is written in the, what do you think this is? Yep, the metaphysics. Now, the maximum in any genus, we've talked about genus and species in this class. Charles Linnaeus gave us the sort of the modern way of understanding that in terms of like the animal kingdom, blah, blah, blah. But see, I think that the fact that Thomas is talking about genus right here is a reminder that he does think that what he's doing is science. It's not empirical science like Bacon invented, and that involves test tubes and repeated experiments, true, but he thinks that it is science nonetheless. And he thinks that sacra doctrina, or theology, is both a theoretical science and a practical science. Have you ever wondered why we have this thing called political science? It's kind of sad, like most political scientists today are not rigorous thinkers, or if they are, it's sort of in a sociological way. It's more about statistics. But originally, political science was supposed to be a what they would call a practical science. Aristotle talks about practical sciences in the Nicomachean Ethics. So ethics is a practical science because it involves human beings and like, how should you live? And like, should you drink 18 beers tonight? Or maybe it would be better to practice moderation and only drink 3, especially if you have a test in the morning. That would be an example of practical science. And Thomas Aquinas thinks that theology, or sacra doctrina, is both a theoretical science and a practical science. But the point right now is that it's a science, and I think that his use of the word genus right here is a reminder of that. All right? Therefore, there must also be something which is to all beings the cause of their being, goodness, and every other perfection, and this we call God. Again, he hasn't talked about Jesus or Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but he still says that these things are God. He also thinks that natural human reason, apart from the Bible, apart from Revelation, can arrive at these truths. I mean, after all, this is what it means to say that it can be demonstrated that God exists. Y'all, there's one more paragraph, and it's about telos. Sorry that I didn't write it on the board, but I only have 5 minutes left. This is the teleological argument, telos. It's the fifth way, okay? And I'm going to just read this paragraph. I'm going to try not to talk about it. We'll see if I succeed. And then maybe if someone has one or two questions or comments, you will feel led to voice them, okay? Come on. All right. The fifth way is taken from the governance of the world. That sounds like providence, the Christian doctrine of providence. I don't think that it is. We see that things which lack intelligence, such as natural bodies like rocks, they act for an end. And this is evident from their acting always or nearly always in the same way so as to obtain the best result. Hence it is plain that not fortuitously, that not fortuitously, but designedly do they achieve their end. Now, whatever lacks intelligence cannot move toward an end unless it be directed by some being endowed with knowledge and intelligence, as the arrow is shot to its mark by the archer. Therefore, some intelligent being exists by whom all natural things are directed to their end. Notice finem right here. What did I say the Latin word for end was, or telos? Finis. This is the accusative case of the word finis. And this being we call God. We did it. Thoughts, questions, comments? That's the 5 ways. Yeah, again, lots of modern people don't believe these. Even some Christians don't believe them. Yeah. Any thoughts, questions? Going once?
It's kind of interesting how the God that Thomas Aquinas describes, at least so far, is also in harmony with like Allah or a lot of other.
Yes.
A lot of other, well, like you mentioned, Aristotle and Plato.
Yes.
Who weren't Jews or Christians.
Yes.
But then, so we're starting at a very base.
Well, and that's because he's talking about natural reason right now. If you were to read question 1, right now we're in question 2. If you were to read question 1, you would see him talking about things like revelation. What Thomas Aquinas thinks is that there are some things that we know only by revelation, namely and especially the doctrine of the incarnation and the doctrine of the Trinity. Maybe creation ex nihilo. Actually, definitely creation ex nihilo for Thomas.
This is separate from the negations. This is positive, a positive. We actually know things about God. We can venture outside of the realm of just not knowing things that are.
Good point. We can venture outside the realm of mere negations. Notice, though, that he's not trying to give a scientific description of God's essence. It is scientific, but it's not a scientific description of God's essence. So, I mean, it's the same with Aristotle. I mean, Aristotle, we read it. In the deduction of the unmoved mover, he does talk about simplicity. He says, God is not this, God is not this, God is not this, God is not this. He does do that. But then he goes on to say that God is the first mover. So you're right, you can make positive statements about God for Thomas on the basis of natural reason alone. But I hasten to add that he doesn't think that he's providing a definition or essence of God. The unmoved mover is not the essence of God. It is a name for God. The telos of the world is another name for God. It's not the essence of God. So remember what essence is. It's the dictionary definition in a philosophically airtight dictionary. That's what Thomas Aquinas says is beyond human reason. It doesn't mean that we don't know some things about God. We do know some things about God, but we cannot give a dictionary definition of God in the same way that we can give a dictionary definition of a frog or a hydrogen molecule. So yeah, but I think that what you said is awesome. It's a great point. Anything else? Okay, peace out. We'll have 2 presentations on Wednesday on Bonaventure. We will begin Bonaventure on Wednesday, and I have some decisions to make about that. But your assigned reading is the Ewart Cousins introduction. What will we read as a class after that? I'm not sure yet. Stay tuned. Have a great weekend. Peace.